So let's move into the third and last part of our hour. This is the bit where we actually get to talk about lottery itself. Lotteries have a history, a pretty proud history of embracing new technologies once they become sufficiently mature to support the mission. I'm thinking particularly about the way lotteries use digital communication networks for connecting retailers to central systems back in the early 1980s. It seems from what we've heard that cloud maybe is at the same stage now in terms of infrastructure. And I know that many of you have or are thinking about it, but the question is it ready for lottery rather than is lottery ready for the cloud? So to explore the implications for lottery itself, I'd like to welcome two people who I'm sure you know pretty well. Rachel Barber, the IGT Lottery CTO, based in Providence, Rhode Island, and Srini Nedunuri, VP of Lottery in charge of product innovation, based in London. Welcome, both of you. Let's have a look at the third of our straw polls for the audience. Given that this whole session is about the players, ultimately, we'd like to know what you think, based on what you've heard so far, about how you think cloud might benefit lottery players. And I really mean in terms of the lottery player experience. So what would you hope you could get out of a cloud migration in terms of an improved level of service? So whilst you're thinking about that, we're going to turn to Rachel and Srini. Rachel, I'm going to put you in the hot seat here for this one. Based on what we've just discussed, lottery industry actually seems to be rather slow, maybe behind the curve a little bit on cloud adoption. Is that a fair impression?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's true. From my standpoint, there are a few reasons behind this. First, because in most cases, these contracts are very long, as we know, several years, in fact. It can make opportunities to innovate just in general during the life of a contract difficult, not only for the lotteries, but also, of course, for vendors like us. And also, we all work in a procurement framework that is quite strict, where the solution offerings are required to abide by whatever specific requests or restrictions might be outlined in the RFP. So historically, requirements for in-state lottery, local data centers, for example, obviously prohibited us to move to cloud. Here in the US, as you mentioned, we have the multi-state lottery rules that also need to be followed by all Powerball member states. And historically, these rules were designed based on expectations of on-premise data centers, which again, prohibited any move to cloud. So even simple requirements in these rules that may have required badged employees, for example, would prohibit any sort of outsourced cloud-hosted infrastructure. And I have to say, in fairness, full transparency, as a result of this environment that we've competed in for so long, it's also true to say that IGT solutions historically have not always been optimized for cloud. The good news is that things are changing, right? And so here we are, we're talking about it, and more we get to talk about digital innovations in the lottery industry that I think the pandemic somewhat motivated in a lot of ways. And we now find ourselves having more opportunities to discuss and really initiate digital change. And I think Muscle, to your point, has really put their money where their mouth is. And kudos to them, because earlier this year, they made an important rule change that now allows for US member lotteries to embrace cloud. So this is a really important first step by the Muscle organization. And of course, now at IGT, our roadmaps are designed around cloud readiness. And we've been making investments for some time now, which enable our solutions to run in the cloud.
Okay, thank you. Srini, we heard a lot earlier on about the value of cloud in accelerating the innovation cycle. Could you give us, make this real for us, okay? What kind of player experiences do you think a cloud-based lottery is going to be able to offer that they couldn't realistically provide for players today?
Yeah, sure. Let's take very simple steps, Charles, here. From player perspective, players expect whenever they're checking the numbers, as a simple example, they want to see if they bought a ticket, they want to see if they won or not. Either they will use a mobile app or a website or check a nearest possible counter, but most convenient, easiest one is the mobile app. So you typically check on that and you expect the results to give you the results if you won or not. And if you won something, then obviously it's great, yeah. But typically this is a case of a standard use case of most players, almost all the players, and every lottery receives, this is the highest number of traffic any lottery receives. A typical average lottery would get about 2 to 10 million. And if the Powerball or Mega Million on the peak jackpot, this becomes almost 10x times. So if your servers, etc., cannot handle, if they're on premise and if they're only certain scale that they can handle, then you certainly have some lag in this responses. So that's number one cause of frustration for the player. If they're trying to check the number, if the response doesn't come through, that's a big, big problem. So as simple as checking your numbers to many other advanced level features you can talk about. You can also update and upgrade, like earlier Pranay was talking about how Netflix and others are updating their content, etc. So it enables you to update frequently your games content, your websites, your features on the from the back end, so on and so forth. At the same time, with cloud ecosystem, it enables you with artificial intelligence, big data, machine learning tools. That ecosystem is very powerful in combination with cloud. And that can certainly enable you because you have a more computing power, more processing speed. You can certainly take advantage of that ecosystem and expand it into personalization, hyper-personalization. We all know how well Netflix does. That's definitely all big data and AI. With that kind of personalization, hyper-personalization, you can also enable what to show and what not to show. If, let's say you have risk profile of high-risk gamers and medium-risk gaming players, you can always conduct your content in such a way that you do not show the high volatility games to the players who are at high risk. That's absolutely an amazing feature for any operator or any lottery, so that you can prevent gaming addiction. And that's another important feature that we can certainly innovate in this space, which we are working towards in preventing responsible gaming side of things. But it's not an easy task because it does require a lot many other things as well. But the good thing is it gives you the environment and ecosystem to grow faster, go forward, innovate new things. That's absolutely essential for our business. And that's why it's great to have simplistic solutions in place, which will drive your innovation forward.
So more games, more quickly, more convenience features. Rachel, I have to ask you this because actually this has come through from the audience, and we touched on it earlier in the first part of the session, but it's about security. You know, a lot of people's instinctive reaction is, well, should I really worry about the security of the data in the cloud? It's pretty valuable and very important data. It seems to be a big issue for a lot of people. What's the position there? How should people in the lottery industry think about cloud and security?
I would suggest we think about it the way we always have, which is to take it very seriously. And it's always been a critical component to the lottery business. So it's not something that we can stop worrying about by any stretch of the imagination. We always say any single transaction logged on the system could in fact be $1 million winner or a multi-million-dollar winner. So the seriousness of protecting the integrity of that transaction in every single one of them, even the losers, is super important to what we do every day, right? So, I mean, as you heard, there's a lot of government agencies and banks, for example, that are hosting really important data in the cloud today. But, you know, even though the cloud providers will definitely, in fact, provide us all sorts of inherent security measures and tools that are fantastic and are protecting data at great magnitude today for lots of businesses, it's also important to remember that when we move an IGT system to the cloud, that doesn't mean we hand over all of our security into the hands of a third party. We look at it quite the opposite, that even in the cloud, we would still be responsible for making sure that the design and the security of the systems as we know it continue to provide like the strictest controls and governance for security that we always have.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed we saw that right at the beginning, actually, with a discussion about some very sort of mission critical, hypersensitive areas that companies had hybrid solutions. You think that's pretty much a possibility as well for lotteries?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are a number of different ways we can go, and you know, I think that the real discussion here is what's important, right? Opening up the door to the possibility for change and figuring out what makes the most sense for each of the lotteries.
Okay, thank you. Listen, that's a perfect place to stop for a second. We're going to look at the poll results. I want to get your feedback to it. So let's bring up the results. Okay, interesting. Number one winner is Srini with service innovations and personalization of the offer. Interesting that data and analysis isn't higher up, whereas previously we saw better data and AI as a key factor. What do you think, guys? I mean, service innovation, is that what's going to drive uptake? Is that what's going to benefit lottery players?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more data we can collect about the players, the more information lotteries have, of course, and they know this, to really improve and advance the player experience. So, you know, we want to give the players what they want, when they want it, where they want it. And the computing power and the scalability and the flexibility of the cloud solutions is really something that's going to help us get there.
It's tremendous. Right. Thank you. Thank you both. I'm afraid we're completely out of time. Really appreciate it. It's been great. I think I've learned a lot. I hope the audience has as well. So thank you very much for attending, and hope to see you again soon.
You too, Charles. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Charles.
Thanks, Srini. So some just quick takeaways at the end of that section. It seems that the RFP cycle is a key factor in this, and as Rachel was saying, it's probably not a surprise that lottery isn't in the vanguard of this, but there's also no reason at all why lottery, it seems, couldn't pick up the pace and catch up. And actually, in a way, you're in a good position because the sector is an awful lot more mature than it would have been, and you don't need to take the risk of being an early adopter. But the potential benefits, I think, seems everybody agrees, are potentially enormous, particularly in terms of modernizing the infrastructure and creating a new lottery experience, which is more responsive, more personalized, more data-driven. So fantastic. Seems like this really is potentially a big deal and something that everybody can benefit from.